Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Beyond the Romance Drama Podcast. And today not today, I am your host, Carolyn. And today I am joined by a special guest, Christine Cole. Like, she's the one I've been waiting to talk to for a while because she is one of the co creators of the most recent JTBC drama, Law School. And I really enjoyed the show. Like, you guys heard me talk about it before in previous episodes, and also if you're following my live tweets, saw my reactions to it. So I really did enjoy this drama. I think it's one of my favorites for the year. I'm a big fan of the legal dramas, and I think Law School has done a pretty spectacular job of interpreting the legal aspect of real life and then incorporating it into drama, which can be hard. And
Mhm.
I'll just ask Christine to talk about herself a little bit, like how she got into writing and how you became involved with the show, and then we'll go on from there. So, Christine.
Um, so hi, I'm Christine. I work at JTBC Studios as a producer director. That's kind of our title. We call ourselves PDs, but no one really knows what it stands for. We're not sure if it stands for producer or producer director or producing director or program director. There are a lot of different opinions about what PD actually stands for, but no one really has an answer. But we're all called that here in the industry. But most of us direct shows. So we start out as assistant directors on a lot of projects, and then like eventually, maybe 6, 7 years in, we get to direct our own stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at now, where I direct the B team or like the second unit. And I started doing that with a drama called Diary of a Prosecutor. That was my first kind of co-director in credit. And then the second one was Law School, which is why I'm here. And I didn't really have any choice in being assigned it. I just was, and um, I had worked with this director twice already before this on Light in Your Eyes and stuff. So we were already very close, and we knew each other from when I was in the non-scripted division. That's where I was with Korean variety shows. Like I was doing Knowing Brothers or Men on a Mission. I was doing that, and this director was actually the one who kind of interviewed me. I think he was one of the like final interviewers. So he kind of, I guess, helped me get hired. So he's a big mentor to me and kind of um, someone I kind of depend on for advice and all of those and guidance in a lot of ways. And I learned a lot from him. So it was really fun being able to do this project with him, having more responsibility and having kind of more creative, I guess, say in things. So that's kind of how I got involved. And I was happy to work with him anyway. I was like, I already kind of know how he works. So it would make it easier for both of us. And yeah, and I liked the script. He knew I liked legal dramas. I like procedurals and legal dramas and like mysteries and thrillers. And I said this is what I watch, like, for fun. So
Hmm.
I feel like I think he knew that I could help because it wasn't like a genre that he particularly has done before or has thought of doing before. So I got to give him a lot of ideas, and I think we fed off each other really well that way. Um, but yeah, that's how I got involved with the show
Mhm.
and kind of what I'm doing.
And how did you get into the film industry itself, like for dramas?
Oh, I mean, it was always a dream of mine. My childhood dream was to be a film director, and so I kind of got carried that with me all through um, secondary school, high school, and college. And then I worked for a year in LA trying to do stuff in film and trying to and I interned at a lot of places. But I had to come back home because of like work visa issues, and
Mm.
it was hard to do that as a Korean person at the time because there wasn't really much need for like a Korean person to be in that industry. Like Korean content wasn't really as big as it is now. I feel like it would be different if I was trying it again right now, but I feel like we've come a long way. But I had to come home anyway, and I guess being a producer at a Korean TV network is it's considered a relatively stable job because you get hired employed by a network. Like so you're on a salary and you have kind of relative job stability in that. So but in order to get hired by a network, you have to take these exams and you have to go through certain like hurdles that seem quite academic.
Mm.
Like you have to take a like a Korean aptitude test that's um, basically made by KBS, the broadcasting network. It's like their thing, and you have to get a certain, I guess, kind of level to even like apply. And like the higher it is, the better it is for you, kind of deal. So I had to do all these. Like I had to do a lot of the checklists, but a lot of it was studying, honestly. Studying like current events and Korean history, which I hadn't done before because I studied abroad, so it was harder for me, I think. But with JTBC, I got lucky because their exam was a little different. It was more like I think it's closer to the LSAT. It's like a lot of word games and kind of like it's like an IQ test,
Mm.
but it was more like language related. So I got lucky, and I think I've heard that I barely passed that test, and I moved on to the interview round. But that's kind of how I got in. I mean, my parents are part of the industry. They met at a broadcasting station. They worked on a children's program together way back in the day. So I'd always been around sets, and um, so yeah, it was. I mean, it was family influence too. But I've never thought of doing anything else. Like it was just kind of like it was that was it from the beginning. So
Mm. I think it's pretty cool that your parents did it and now you're in it too. And
mhm.
it's fascinating that you have to take, like as you said, an aptitude test to work for the networks. That's something that never occurred to me. Like I figured like you
Right,
would
right, right.
probably have to do some kind of test or some kind of entry level test.
Hmm.
Like for like here, like if you were good for most jobs, even if you have like a diploma or a degree or whatever, you still have to do like a licensing test for whatever it is you want to do. But I'm
Yeah, yeah.
wondering, I maybe I'm wrong, but I'm thinking for like the you said the KBS one, it was more about Korean history and stuff. Do you think it was because like for the shows that would be produced, they wanted to see if you would have the knowledge necessary to produce these shows, like to make sure that stuff is accurate and like if anyone said anything untoward, you'll be able to be like, nope, that's not okay or that's not okay, and or maybe it's just like they were just trying to be like, I'm gonna give you guys all the hurdles you can before you start working here.
I mean, a lot of the work we do is we deal with text also. Like, I mean, we work with video and we make video content, but we read scripts. And even if you're in the variety show or unscripted department, you have to actually write the captions yourself. So I think that's probably why Korean, being able to speak Korean fluently and having like a, I guess, above average understanding of the language and kind of like the the subtle nuances and
Mm.
connotations of the language, I think is important. But I think that's kind of why I'm not 100% sure because it doesn't really have much to do with creativity or like your ideas, but that's part of the exam too. Like it's the exam is kind of two parts. It's like one is it could be like the current events stuff or like the history stuff, and then they make you write like either a sample of your creative writing or they give you like a prompt and ask you to kind of um,
You
write
know.
out a show that you would do that's kind of related to this theme, kind of on the spot. So I think they test both things. They test your idea and also just your general, I guess, language aptitude level, which I think is important. But it's really not easy. It took me like a year and a half to study for
Wow.
these exams. And I don't think I've ever studied harder. It's just so yeah.
Wow. That's
Mhm.
fascinating to me. I'm also a fan of variety shows and like I
Mhm.
have watched like Knowing Bros. Like I've watched a good number of Knowing Bros
Mhm.
shows and like a lot of the other variety shows, like Three Meals a Day is like my all-time favorite variety.
Mhm.
But I know like for they do bring up the text and like one thing I do love about Korean variety shows or even like the dramas is like they give context to phrases. Like if something might be
Yeah, yeah.
like we would say a slang, or they might be making references to some historical thing, like they'll always include, okay, so this reference, this thing this person said is
Mhm.
in reference to this, or
Mm-hmm.
like for the dramas, like if there's like a technical term, whether it's a medical or a legal, they give you like the technical terms in the box. So like that's something that
Mm-hmm.
I always appreciate with Korean shows in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like the what's the word I'm looking for? The want of making sure that the audience understands what's being talked about fully and not just assuming that they get it or leaving them confused,
Right, right.
not sure what's going on.
Hmm. I think Korea has like probably like the highest literacy level, I want to say. Like it's one of the countries with highest literacy because our language is really easy to learn to read, I've heard.
It
Because
is.
it's phonetic. Yeah, it's
I can,
phonetic and stuff.
yeah, because
So
I,
a lot of
oh,
things
sorry, go ahead.
we I think we try to explain a lot of things to viewers by text because it's I think it's how people like to process a lot of information here. So I think they're really used to it now because it's always there's constantly text on our TV.
Yeah.
It's
No,
interesting.
it is true because I'm learning like right now I'm learning Korean. I was learning for a while and then it took a break. I kind of got kind of like lax with it over the pandemic. But I started back with my classes and I'm dyslexic. So I've
Mm,
studied, I've taken classes in like Mandarin and Japanese and like other
mm-hmm.
languages, and Korean to me is the most phonetic in the fact that because I'm dyslexic, like there's no small dashes like how you would have in like Japanese
Yeah.
katakana or even Chinese characters. Like
Mm-hmm.
the letters are like straightforward, and the alphabet is easy for me to read. Like I can read Hangul now, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just the grammar that I need to that I need to actually learn and practice, and also that. But then when you get into the particles, that's a whole other ball game because there's so
Yeah,
many.
like learn like understanding it and like reproducing Korean is different. I think that's really hard. Like learning to actually speak and write it is hard, but reading is really easy. Like you can just read the text without necessarily being able to understand it. Like it's an easy language to learn to read, I've
It,
heard. So
it
yeah.
is. So yeah, that's I think that's probably why it's so like reading and speaking it for me is easy. Just like I just gotta stop being ridiculous and actually learn my grammar, learn the
Yeah, yeah,
word,
yeah. No, it's hard. It's a hard language to learn, I think.
the rules, the
Mm,
language
so
rules.
many rules. I didn't know there were that many rules because I was studying for this test and I was like, I didn't know Korean was this hard. Because thank God I was born into it because this is hard. Like this would be so hard for someone who learns it as a second language.
It is, but
Yeah.
I think I love it as a language from verbally because I'm Bajan, so I have a dialect, and some of the
Mm-hmm.
the way that we pronounce some of our words are actually I find fairly similar to how
Mm-hmm.
Koreans pronounce certain words in Hangul. So like I think
That's
that's
good.
easy for me.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we get a bit into the drama now. So Law School is a Netflix drama, and so one thing what I think I prepared the list of questions that like I sent them to you, and like one of my favorite things, like I'm a very visual person, so I love
Mm.
when I get visual clues and like when directors and writers include, like I call them motifs,
Yeah.
or imagery that represents things. And one thing I love about this show is the motif of the puzzles
Mm-hmm.
and the elephants. And the thing with this drama is it's a legal drama. It's set at the Hanguk University, which is a law university, and it's about this multiple mysteries. It's a murder case, but in typical Korean K drama fashion, there's different side stories that all interconnect to this one main story. And I think that's like so. I think that's like really good, but then also complicated because I was wondering like, how do you guys create all these little side plots that tie into this one big thing? And one of the main parts of this show to me is the imagery and is this motif of a puzzle. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the puzzle represents the entire show. Like everything is
Mm-hmm.
about these little pieces fitting in to form this one
Mm-hmm.
big picture. And so could you just tell me a bit about this motif in particular, about and how when you're creating the show and directing it, how are you able to fit all of these pieces in and using the motif as an example of that?
I think with the puzzle, it started out being something that we wanted I mean, it was obviously written into the script from the first scene, and you see him doing this puzzle, and we were like, this is kind of going to be Professor Yang's thing. And it didn't, the script didn't necessarily say, I mean, I guess it did, because it was like, you can see, you don't really know that it's an elephant, but later you can see like out, the general shape of an elephant. And
Mm.
we just figured from the way we kind of edited it and placed it in the show, and also like how much of the puzzle we wanted to show, and like how many holes there were. So if you watch really closely, I think how big the hole is that hasn't yet been filled, or how many holes there are, is kind of the questions that haven't been answered, the parts of the mystery that haven't been filled in, and kind of like who Professor Yang's gonna go after next, like um, who's kind of on his radar. So
Mm.
there's a point where there are two big holes, and so we were kind of saying that one is like Manho and one is the assemblyman, the congressman. So we weren't sure if people were going to pick that up, but we did want it to be like a visual kind of representation. It's subtle. You got to really be into the show and watch it closely to even catch on to that. But the elephant, we didn't really think of it as a symbol. Like, I know you mentioned in your list of questions about how um, it's a really elephants are really intelligent. They have a really amazing memory and all of that. But I don't think we took that into consideration. I'm not sure. I wasn't part of that conversation. None of the conversations we had were about elephants, but it was just because it was written into the script that he was doing this elephant puzzle. We decided to say, okay, he's going to be someone who really enjoys elephants as an
Mm.
image. So we placed it kind of all around his house. So that was a creative decision that we made, that we wanted it to represent him, and kind of when people see like elephants and puzzles, it reminds them of Professor Yang. So those kinds of, I think, decisions help make a character and kind of help flesh out this character into like a real being from text. And I think it helps the actor too to have those kinds of um, visual cues and just kind of imagery to base off his character off of.
Mm.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does because one of the things I love about the character of Professor Yang, Yang Jun-un, played by Kim Young Min, is to me he has a very commanding presence. Like when he
Mm,
first walks into the scene, into the first scene, like he's wearing it all black. This is something that he's worn the entire show, like he wears all black. But I just saw it as like if an elephant walks into a room, you can't miss it.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
his presence will be felt and his presence will be known, and he's kind of like that. So I kind of related the imagery of the elephant to that in that to him in that sense, and also because like, as you said, like elephants are extremely intelligent, and he's a very intelligent man. Like the way
Mm,
he's able to disseminate information and pick clues from things that people say and things they do and anticipate their behavior. I'm like, this man is someone that you don't want to trifle with. And I thought it was interesting that he was a prosecutor before, and then he's now a law professor. And and for someone like him, where he was basically made to leave the profession that he chose, which was being a prosecutor, to being a professor. It to me, he comes across as someone is like, I'm just waiting for the opportunity to like flex my muscle again. And
mm,
this murder case just unfortunately just happens to be this opportunity where he's able to like kind of get back at the people who took his job away, because he encounters like a former prosecutor who is basically
mm,
nemesis in the series. And then because he only has his students, but then he's able to show them in the real world how he operated as a prosecutor. And I thought it was fascinating because I just wanted to ask you, so could you tell me about the decision to bring him out of the mock court, because I think it's interesting that it went from working in the mock court into being into a real trial, into a real courtroom, and he got to show them the opportunity. So could you just tell me about having the first scene take place in the mock court itself rather than say in like a regular classroom?
um, I mean, I think the um, I did talk about this before, but the the first scene originally was written to be in that study room that teaser that we made
Mm.
with the Chinese food, and they're talking amongst themselves about um, they're just like reciting articles of law, just like in their daily arguments. So that was kind of originally going to be the first scene, but I our director made the decision to go with that mock trial scene first, just because I think it's probably the best place to just get a sense of the setting of being at law school.
Mm.
So I think like if we just started in a classroom, like people wouldn't really know if it was just like a regular university, like undergrad classroom, or just any kind of college. I mean, it could be med school, it could be anywhere. But the decision to start with it in court is like pretty much from the get-go, from the moment they open the doors, it's like, oh, this is a law school and this is what law school students do. And in that scene you see the dynamics of all the characters, and you see Council A with her pajamas, and you see Council B like knowing her stuff, and kind of owning Chiho and his like prosecutor suit, and it's they're all very serious, but you can it's kind of cute at the same time, because it kind of makes it feel like they're pretending, kind of playing shop a little bit. I don't know, playing house. Um, so I think it was just a much stronger way to introduce law school, because we haven't really had Korean dramas about law schools anyway. So it was it was a visual scene that hadn't really been done before. So we did want to start off with that. So because when audiences are introduced to something new right from the get-go, they can be like, oh, this is actually maybe a show that could be refreshing and something we haven't seen before. So I think we wanted to start it off that way.
Mm.
Mm.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the motif, but in the sense of like how we talked about the motif for the show is puzzles. When you're creating a show, like it is based, you guys are essentially creating a puzzle because you have all of the moving parts. You have the cast, you have the
Mm.
dialogue, you have
Mm.
the different sets that you have to put together, your camera crews, your locations, and all of these things, and you're doing all these things to form one whole big picture at the end of it. And so can you just tell me a bit about the process, the creative process from your perspective, creating a drama like this, and like what was the easiest thing for you, or something that you found that was kind of like your niche as working as a PD, or and what was your most challenging experience with the production?
Um, hmm. I mean, I think my niche was kind of, the place where I can be of most help is in the edit room, because I did a lot of the editing myself,
Mm.
and just based on how much of how many procedurals I had watched and how many legal dramas I had watched, I think they became really good references for me to have this kind of innate rhythm and a sense of, okay, is this good or not, or like can this keep people engaged or not, and like focused. So I had kind of an innate sense of that, and I think that helped me a lot when I was editing, because I wanted there to be like never a dull moment in this whole episode, in this hour. I wanted people to be kind of just like, fixed to the screen a little bit. I didn't want them to have enough time to look at their phones. I don't
Mm.
know. Because that's kind of how we watch TV now. It's just like we kind of leave it on and we do other things. But I wanted this show to be so visually engaging and stimulating all the time that you couldn't keep your eyes off it. So that was kind of my niche, and I felt like I did um, a pretty good job. I can pat myself on the back for that. But I mean, that was also the easiest part and also the most challenging part, because although I had watched it a lot, but I had never done it before myself. So it was kind of trying to find a way of having kind of a sense that's unique to law school, that doesn't make it seem like other shows. I didn't want to like you know, um, copy or kind of do the same thing that other shows have done. So
Mm.
it was kind of finding that balance between, what is our show good at doing and what is cool about our show, what is unique about our show, and also being able to kind of merge that with the parts that people like about procedurals. And fans of legal dramas, they like a certain thing. So usually people who like legal dramas watch almost all the legal dramas and procedurals and stuff. So I was like, there must be a reason why people do that. So we wanted to stay true to those fans, but also say, hey, this is kind of what we're offering, and have those other scenes of just campus life and of kids being cute. And balancing that was, I think, pretty challenging for me. um, and I mean, the storylines weaving in and out together. I know you said that that's one of your favorite parts about Korean dramas and this show. But I mean, I gotta give the writer pretty much all the kudos for that, and I gotta give her all the flowers for that. And also our director, who worked on the script with her. I mean, I joined pretty late into the process. They had already written like 6 episodes or 7 already when I had signed on to do the show. So a lot of the script work was done in advance. So I can't really speak to that, but I do know that they worked really hard together, like as a team, or a director and a writer, to make sure that there weren't any holes. And I think when I was brought in as fresh eyes, the first thing they said was, "Are there any holes that we can't spot?" Because when you're reading a script just like all the time and constantly, you kind of get so immersed in it that it's hard for you to see what's missing. And sometimes you spot it like during the last stage of like post production. It's like, oh wait, that line doesn't make sense, or like, oh, this doesn't make sense. So we did, edit a lot of stuff and change a lot of stuff last minute too, because of those things that we missed originally, because we were so kind of engrossed in the book and couldn't stay objective anymore. So that was hard. I mean, finding holes and making sure that there weren't any you know flaws in the logic or in the crime itself, because I knew all the fans would be like, just kind of scrutinizing every detail, and they wouldn't look like miss any of the details. So we didn't want to mess up. Um, so that was hard. That's like the hardest thing about doing a procedural, I think.
Going starting with the editing, I think you guys did a fantastic job of the editing because like you said, you wanted it done in such a way that people, the audience, would be stuck to it and they'd be engaged in it. And like me being a live tweeter, like my I tend to like watch the dramas and live tweets, and most some of the ones that I watch. And for this one, I live tweeted it, but I didn't like do like I wasn't constantly tweeting
Mm,
comments
mm,
about
mm,
the what I
mm,
was
mm,
watching. I was just making sometimes I use my tweets as notes for my recaps
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
making observations. And everything does matter. Like I love when I'm watching a film or a show, and like everything that is said and everything that is done is a clue or a potential clue depending on how you read it. And like for this show in particular, like we talk about the motifs and the puzzles. Like there are moments where the puzzles do play a part in what's happening, and they are like the individual puzzle pieces are clues. Like this is a question we'll get to later, but I love how the actual individual puzzle pieces play a part in the plot and in the
Mm,
characters. Like for yeah, Juno, like he fiddles with
mm,
puzzle
mm,
pieces when he's trying to figure stuff out, and I think that's really cool. And usually when that happens, there's like that there's a moment that comes either right before or after where something happens and it's revealed later on to have a significant part
yeah.
in the story, and then that's how
Mm,
you remain engaged because you're thinking, wait, if that's happened, so then what she said is gonna tie into what he said, and then it's all gonna come back. So like the editing does
mm,
play a part in that, because like how the story flows happens because of the editing. Like if you guys didn't edit it properly and like the story felt disjointed, it wouldn't work.
mm,
Like everything that happens at the end wouldn't work. And so like
mm,
you guys did a fantastic job with that. And then talking about for the writing, like yeah, like kudos like to the director Kim Suk Hyun, and then the writer So In. Like I have a diploma in paralegal studies, so I like this is one of the reasons I love legal dramas, because like law before I became a critic. Like I studied law, and I was going to become a paralegal, and then I switched career paths. But I like when things make sense legally, and like even if things are done for dramatic purposes where you're like, this would never happen in a natural courtroom, but the way it does happen is like still plausible. And then like the way how the cases happen, like you guys did, like the writing did a fantastic job with that. And I think especially with the continuity, because there are moments where you're like, why does this matter? Then it does, and then it ends up
Mm,
mattering. And then where how the legal cases tying into the murder trial, I think is super impressive. It kind of reminded me of this. I always forget the name. Is it Inspector Joe? I can't remember. I always forget the name of this drama, but it's one where they do legal case. Like most of them were like workplace safety cases or cases where human rights cases in South Korea.
mm,
And
mm,
like these all of these little cases kind of tie into the one big story plot, but they're all real situations that happen. Like a lot of them were cases where like changes in the law were made as a result of these situations and these
mm,
things that happen. So that drama, this kind of reminds me of that, where you had, because like the references for like the mock trials and the class and
mm,
the case studies that the students had.
mm,
I did some research on like the references that I mentioned, like the articles and like
mm,
the law. So I did some research on them, and I was like, because I'm also interested in like Korean law, and I was like, okay, I this is an actual reference, and this is an actual this is an actual legal precedent. And I wanted to ask you guys about the cases that were chosen for the individual storylines, like for Yesol's storyline. Hers is about domestic abuse and intimate partner violence, and then there's the other cases where like it talks about bribery, and then that ends up be tying into the whole plot. So could you tell me a little bit about the cases that were chosen, and just about, I know like you said you came in late into the writing, like like after
mm.
like episode 7, but could you just tell me a bit about the decision to pick the which cases that were chosen, and if any of them were based on real world situations? Because when it was happening, I was thinking about the case with YG and then Burning Sun and those kind of
Mhm.
cases. And so I was wondering about the reference cases used in the show.
Um, I mean, I don't think we were considering the Burning Sun stuff, but a lot, I mean, at all. I don't think that was part of the conversation at all. But the first mock trial scene, that is, it could be reminiscent of a famous kind of um like mystery. I think murder mystery here is like whether they committed suicide or whether they were killed by, with drugs by someone else, whether it was a homicide. So that was that was also kind of based on a real case. Um, and the whole thing about the whole thing with domestic violence and date rape and intimate partner violence and stuff like that. I mean, it's constantly an issue here.
Mm.
It's not news or anything recent. So I think um, and I'm glad we talked about it in the way that we did. Hopefully, we didn't do any injustice to it, because I was most scared of that was kind of how it would be viewed by women, and particularly if there were any victims that were watching, whether it could be triggers or whether it didn't represent them right. Like I was worried about that, but I haven't heard anything on that front. I haven't heard any feedback based on that, but a lot of people, told me, kind of mostly international fans, were that was a storyline that didn't seem, um, I guess, inappropriate or politically incorrect or anything like that. So I was glad about that. But the scenes that they discussed in the classroom, they were all laws that were kind of about to be changed or that had been recently changed, like this past year or last year. Um, so I think our writer did a really great job in staying relevant and in not, because law school is such a new thing here. It hasn't always been around. It's not even been around for like 10 years. So I think she wanted to make sure that the stuff that they talked about, it wasn't ancient law
Mm.
or like ancient or anything classical, that it was relevant to now. And so people who are watching, I think it helps the audience become more engaged, because, oh yes, I've heard about that in the news, or um, it's something that they've always been hearing about recently. So I think it helped them stay engaged. So she did a wonderful job. She's really experienced in like that field. I think she has a lot of knowledge because her previous drama was about judges. So um, I think that's kind of her specialty. So we could rely on her to do the due diligence on that. Like we were pretty sure that what she was writing, we weren't gonna have to worry about. And I think she did a really great job. I don't think we made any kind of mistakes on that front. But yeah, your thoughts are right that they are based on real life stories that are happening now. We didn't make any very specific claims or references to say this is a reference to this particular case. The cases they talk about in the classroom are not real,
Mm.
and they're all like not real case numbers, but they resemble cases that have been in the news. So um, it was a delicate line to be on. We wanted to make sure that people knew that they weren't real cases, but they could be. So
Yes.
yeah.
Like you like speaking a bit about Yiso's story. Her story really touched me because I find with not only just Korean dramas, but like dramas whether they're made in America or Asia, like Japanese or Chinese or whatever. Like sometimes when it comes to discussing not only domestic violence but also but rape with in regards to rape in relationships, like it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't get touched on very well. Like sometimes it's not handled very well
Mm,
at all, where there is the clear definition of whether you're married or dating someone, it is still considered rape. And sometimes that's something that does bug me with dramas or even with films where I'm like, you need to make a clear distinction that this is still classified as rape, right?
mm-hmm,
And one thing
mm-hmm,
your show does is it does do that. Like they say, like,
mm-hmm,
and I love that more than one character points this out to Issa and to others and to other characters. Like they're saying, like, it's still rape, point blank.
mm-hmm,
It wasn't called assault. It wasn't, you know what I mean? Like the
mm-hmm,
word rape used, and I think that's also very, very important. And one of the and I think one of my favorite scenes in the entire series is in the courtroom
mm-hmm,
where she's on trial and they're saying that, like, because, like, it's a Korean drama. You still gotta do the drama where her boyfriend, he abused her and he raped her, and his father, who has the power, is basically using his influence to prosecute her and to persecute
mm-hmm,
her for how dare she hurt his son. Like, he doesn't care that his son is a rapist. He doesn't care that his son is an abuser. All he cares about is that it's about his pride and about his son's pride. And I know for some people, like, it might seem like Yang was kind of like badgering her because he's like going at her hard. But I found that scene to be really important because to me I saw that as the scene where she took back her power, where she
yeah,
was
yeah,
like, I'm smart. I'm not only am I a law student, I'm a smart student. I know what I'm talking about and I know how to defend
yeah,
myself as a
mm-hmm,
person and as a woman. And I thought it was really important that he put that power back in her hands, right?
mm-hmm,
And so could you just tell me a little bit about that scene and about struck like just shooting that scene, because I want to know what the feeling was like on the set, and like if like how not only for your perspective as PD but also your perspective as a woman working in the industry. And like as you mentioned, like these are still issues that need to really be contended with in like Korean, and I would say in society in general, because like when it comes to violence against women, society is not as forward thinking as we would like to think sometimes.
mm-hmm. I mean, that scene was done. It went really as smoothly as it could because the actors were more than prepared,
Mm.
as we found out, and we found like Yoon Jung, who played Esther, she was kind of really on top of her stuff. Like she was on point that day, and she did really well. So we really didn't have to do very many takes, and we liked it when she did it the first time. And
Mm.
I think she gave it her all, and I think it was easy maybe for her to identify with the character. And I think I remember her saying that that was probably like her one of her favorite scenes to do because the way Yeso's character develops is like she stays relatively kind of quiet, and I guess she was the victim for most of the story, but this is the part where she kind of rises above that and says I'm not gonna let this happen to me anymore, and this is what I'm gonna say, the things that need to be said. And obviously, as a woman, I'm more wary when it comes to stories that talk about that kind of stuff. And I think I was very lucky to work with male directors who are very sensitive to that stuff. So when I did Hello My 20s, or Age of Youth, like whichever the English title is, because it's about five women who are in college, and it's a very female centric story, written by a woman but directed by men,
Mm.
a male director. And a lot of the crew, like, both of the assistant directors, including me, were female. And we didn't really it wasn't really necessary to have those discussions and be like, oh, you need to be more sensitive to this, or you need to be more sensitive to that. And especially with law school too, I was obviously very kind of cautious and sensitive to that. But our director, I think he prefers female centric stories,
Mm.
and I think he identifies with women a lot. And he really genuinely feels for them, and I think he really loves women. And, like, when we I don't want to speak for him, so maybe I won't do that, but he was already very aware of the consequences that our show could have. And, like, based on what it says, it could, make a lot of opinions in people. And so I think he was very conscious of what kind of power that scene has, and kind of how we need to portray it. And so, yeah, he was already doing a great job. Like, I didn't really need to step in with my, like, woman card. Like, I didn't even have to use that card at all. And it was more about, like, human emotions. Like, I feel like um it wasn't a set where, like, genders mattered. Like, everyone was on the same page about how we needed to portray that scene. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean because like I was talking with someone today on Twitter where I was talking like some of my favorite films about women are films directed by men. Park
Mm-mm-mm.
Chan-wook for like Lady Vengeance is like one of my all-time favorite films. And then
Mm-mm-mm.
there's like The Handmaiden and like Zhang Yimou, he's one of my favorite directors. Like all of his films are usually female centric. And like he
Mm.
writes about women, I think, so thoughtfully. You can tell that he's someone who listens to women, and like
Mm-mm.
when he's directing like his female characters, you can tell that he's coming from a place of like genuine honesty, and like he's someone who pays attention. And like
Yeah, yeah.
I watched The Wailing today, like is Na Hongjin. I think he did a fantastic job. And like when you look at the subtext of what the story is about, it's a very delicate subject matter. And like for a man to be able to like translate that story and be able to, I think, touch women is it takes very is something very special,
Mm.
because like not a lot of male directors get it. So I do understand what you mean. And like for this
Mm.
show, and as you said, it is like most of the lead characters are women, because you have Kang Sole and Kang Sol B and then Yi So, and like their stories play a big part in the story. And then especially as we're talking about Yi So, like to have a male director who understands that where he's like what he's doing needs to be handled with
Mm.
care and thoughtfulness, I think
Mhm.
is very important, because a lot of male directors do not understand and do not get that.
Right, right, right.
And it comes through in the show, and it comes through, I think, in the portrayals, because if the actresses aren't comfortable, you can usually tell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think he he is really aware of, kind of, he's very sensitive to the actors, like, needs and kind of their kind of state of mind at the time when we're filming the scenes. And so he tries to make sure that, technically we are all very prepared, and there's nothing's gonna go wrong technically for the acting to kind of have to be stopped in the middle or having to be done again. Like, he makes sure that they don't have to do that stuff
Mm.
over and over and over again, because it can be traumatizing. Even if you're acting, even if you're just pretending, it's not an easy thing to portray.
Mhm.
Like, being a victim, and because it's such an emotional scene too, for not just for Yeza, but for Professor Yang too. It's a lot of lines, and it's a lot of emotion that, is best when it's just done the first time, and it's both fresh for both of them. So, like, the emotions are real. So we try to get it then. and not have to do it again, and make sure that they have no regrets when they're doing it, and even after it ends, like that they know and we know that that was the best version of that scene. So I think our director takes a lot of care in making sure that that we are able to do that in a very short amount of time. Because the longer you drag out a scene, the more tired people get, and you can see, like, the acting. You know when it's fresh versus when it was when it's the result of having to do it over and over and over again. I think that makes a lot of difference too. Um, and the thing about law school that I notice now is that it feels so live. And the reason that it feels alive, and the reason it feels the acting doesn't feel forced or fake at all, is because a lot of it was, from the first take or the only take. And I think it comes off the screen. That's kind of what I learned. He's just extra cautious of that when it's an emotional scene or any kind of scene that where someone is a victim, or where someone is either reliving trauma, or trauma is or things that are happening to them that are traumatizing. We want to make sure that they don't have to do it more than is necessary.
I imagine it makes it easier for you during editing too, because you don't have like 30 or 40 takes to sift through. You only
Mm-hmm.
have like a few takes, and it's easier to pick out the
Mm-hmm.
best take to go
Yeah.
with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, definitely. I mean, obviously, we didn't do that scene just once. We do it from the beginning to the end, just kind of, as like wide shots, so that so you can generally see everything, and then we go in close together. So they usually do it at least twice.
Yeah.
So we have at least two or three options to choose from, and if the actors want to do it again, we're like, yes, feel free to try again if there's a part that you think you could do better. And so we try to take that into consideration when we're acting too, like I was I was on set, and I remember the actor likes this particular take, so
Mm.
maybe with this line I use that take. And we mix a lot of the takes too, so um, yeah, it definitely makes it easier.
Mhm. Yeah, because like you, as you're talking, like one of my favorite scenes also is with Kang Sol B, and she's a character that she turned out to be a surprise because she seems very cold at first, and
Mm,
like when it comes to women, like a lot of people takes women's self-confidence as arrogance, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
that's considered a turn off. But for
Mm,
her, like I love how her story comes about with like the way she is the way she is because of like her relationship with her parents and
mm,
all of
mm,
this pressure of expectation that her mother has put on her. But there's
mm,
this scene between her and her dad, who's the vice dean of the school, Kang Juman, played by Oman Suk, and Kang B. I think it's hilarious that it's Kang A and Kang B, played by Lee Soo Kyung, where like this is the moment where she takes they're in conflict of should they tell the truth about her father being in the office and when he was in the office and that she was in the office too, and she puts the sugar pack in her pocket. And this is a scene I've seen this show. I've watched the show twice, and this is a scene that has still stuck with me. Is I think
mm,
the acting in this scene is so well done. Where he looks at her and he just has this devastated look on his face, where he's like, "Oh shit, what did I do? Like I messed up
mm,
as a father." And he looks
mm,
completely devastated and disappointed in himself,
mm,
and then
mm,
also at the disappointment where of what he considers where his daughter could end up, because he's like, if she's
mm,
willing to make she's willing to make this decision, like what is she willing to do in the future?
yeah,
And
yeah.
that to me was like a really a moment that has really stuck with me. Though that and the scenes with Yisel in the courtroom. Like so could you tell me, like, are there any scenes in particular that really stand out to you and like really stick with you with regards to like how the character is story, but also with how the actors play them as well?
Um, I mean, the scene that I think I worked the hardest on was Professor Yang's like last kind of trial, his last rebuttal, his final statements. That was my favorite part in terms of just watching someone who's very good at their craft do their thing. It was very enjoyable to watch on set, and it was fun to edit because it's just fun when you're watching good actors act, and it makes the work not seem like work. So I could edit it for hours on end, and just it was never boring or anything like that. So that scene, I really love that scene. But I also really like the scene where the students in the final episode, after they've all drank and they're like lying on the the ground and they're like reciting their lines. And I like those like comical kind of more lighter moments between the students too. Um, and that last kind of scene where they're all having beer and they do, like Chunyi and Soleil and Sophie do their like little group high five thing. I really like that scene too. Um, yeah, I mean, because I've grown close to them and stuff, and I think those moments kind of stick with me also. But the scene that you're referring to, it comes with being her dad. That's a really good point, and um, you know, Oman that the actor, he's really good. He's really very subtle in his acting. It's not like overly theatrical or pronounced. It's quick.
Mhm.
Like the emotions in his eyes are so quick and it's fleeting, but it's there. Like his whole face just kind of changes based on what he feels, and because it's not pronounced, you might miss it. But when you're really watching, it's there, and he does it so effortlessly. It feels effortless,
Mhm.
but he does it so well, and I love that it's subtle and it's not like he doesn't like make any big kind of exaggerated movements or anything like that. It's just all kind of in his eyes and his face. So um, I do like that scene as well because that's when it gets revealed that he's her dad. That's
Yeah.
like the same scene I remember. Um, so we were like, oh, what are people gonna think? We were excited to see the kind of the reaction to that scene too.
Yeah, that's when it was revealed like he's her dad, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. It was like that was me. I was like, that makes so much sense about why she is the way she is. And then I'm like, because if you take
Mm-hmm,
him and then take his wife into consideration, she's like, "Woo, girl."
mm-hmm,
He's like, things got to be tough for you at home. But then also it was like, it made me afraid, like kind of like how he was like disappointed and devastated. Like I was afraid for her too because I'm like, how are you going to be a lawyer and you're willing to break the law or like this already? Like, because this is concealing evidence. Like this is perjury. Like
right,
you're
right.
to sacrifice Yang because of that evidence, like that was the evidence they needed to prove that Yang did give the professor
Mm,
saw the sugar, and I'm like, this is vital evidence, and you're like telling your own father like act like nothing happened, and I'm like, all y'all should not be lawyers. None of you. Most of these kids, I'm like, y'all would make sucky lawyers because they jump to judgment so quick. Oh my gosh, these kids had me. I was like, whoo, my professors would tear into them. But then also for that scene,
right.
I'm like, you aren't even graduated from law school yet, and you're just breaking the law without hesitation. Like it was such an easy thing for her to do,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And they were
mm-hmm.
just like, whoo, these kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think also, but like a lot of people in that situation, they would be tempted to do that. Like that would be a really hard temptation to kind of fight and defeat and to take that shortcut. So, you know, I feel like a lot of smart kids, and especially kind of that scene and a lot of our characters, they because they were smart, they knew the easy way and the fast way to go for most of the things. Um, you know, yield the best result with least amount of time because it was important that they do because everyone has a finite amount of time and an infinite amount of study that they have to do. So I think they're always about efficacy and um, because they're so used to thinking that way that they like finding those shortcuts. But I did like the show saying that with Council A, like the reason her character is there is because the law isn't necessarily about shortcuts and getting there as fast as you can. It's just a matter of by the time you end your education, like are you someone that's worthy of practicing law
Mhm.
and of being able to be someone that can, stand up for people and stand up for things that you think are, yeah, unjust. So I think and that character, she has a lot of influence and she affects a lot of the other kids who are, quote unquote typical law school kids. So I think I don't. Yeah, even if they were willing to take the shortcuts in the beginning, I think later they're all different. So I liked that growth personally.
Yeah, because I think they saw the consequences of what happens when you flout
Mm-hmm.
the law and try to treat the
Mm-hmm.
law as something that's easy manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
That's important for law students because and that's one of the things I thought was interesting about the show starting in the mock court and then moving to the real trial where this is where it's not just theory. Now they're getting the actual practical of it. They're seeing the actual consequences of these situations. And like when it's a mock court, you just have an abstract idea. You're thinking strictly from the book and about you're thinking like, okay, this is what the law says what happened. But when you get into real life, you have to be able to apply. That's the thing with law. Law is all about interpretation and application. Like, how will you apply
Exactly.
this law to the situation that's occurring? And for them, the real cases, the real life situations taught them that you can have the book knowledge, but if you don't have the life experience, like it's not gonna work. And like they learned that the life experience does affect how you see the law. It's not all cut and dry. The law is really not all black and white sometimes,
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah.
which is kind of funny because they always say, "Oh, the law is the law," but I'm like, it's all about interpretation and application, people. Um, so I want to get a bit with the technical. So we talked at the beginning. We talked a bit about the puzzle. So like, there's this scene. So like you would when it comes to dramas, there's always usually more than one villain.
Mm-hmm.
And like I call him the sub villain, and that's Imano, played by Jo Jae Rung. And this is a scene to me is when it comes to technical things and like one of the small clues. Like I only picked up on it when I rewatched the show. This is where he is talking with Yang, and Yang is again fiddling with the puzzle. But there's a moment where the camera pans around from Imano's perspective and swings around Yang, and then it focuses just for a few seconds on Yang playing with the puzzle piece and it's superimposed on Imano's film. So I wanted to ask you about that because to me that was the moment I was like, oh wait, this is the signal that this man is the key to all of these things, all these cases and everything that's going wrong is he has the key to everything. And that was to me, I was like, that's actually super genius. So I wanted to ask you about creating that scene and if my interpretation of it is like right where it was like that was a signal to like this is the person that we need to
No,
be.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because I mean, obviously, the reason he's fiddling with that puzzle, I mean, we wanted the puzzle piece to stand for, I think it was reasonable doubt,
Mm,
and kind of like just whenever someone is under suspicion, and because it gets passed over from Professor Yang to Chunyi at one point, which is I think originally it was supposed to be like the suspicion kind of moves from Professor Yang to Chunyi, and
yeah.
sort of so when he's fiddling with the puzzle, it kind of stands for that. And so that moment with Mano, the reason he's fiddling with it is because he's trying to go after this guy, and he thinks that he's a really key part of this mystery, but there's nothing really to hold him for because he has an alibi, where he's made himself an alibi. But still, Professor, like we wanted to say, he's not completely off the list. Like there's still a kind of a reasonable amount of doubt, and at least Professor Yang has those doubts, even if the audience might not. So
Mm.
that was kind of, yeah, that was definitely a subtle clue, and I think our DPs did a really wonderful job capturing that moment. Because we have multiple cameras going at the same time. I think sometimes we get lucky with those kind of scenes where the audience thinks, oh, that was like, I'm sure that they meant to film it that way. And sometimes we just get lucky with those scenes because we have such, great DPs that have a really great understanding of the story. And, um, it's a very special set because we have about 3 or 4 cameras going out at one time, which technically isn't true for a lot of sets. It's usually only 1 or 2. And so because we have 4 cameras, they're all trying to kind of not be in each other's space, or like, the amount of screen space that they have to share. So they have to go into places where they're not, they don't get the same angle. They're trying to get kind of a different, view of the scene. So they go into really these weird strange, like either cramped spaces or kind of usually like angles they wouldn't go to, but sometimes those are like the ones that really look great or the ones that we'll end up using. So it's a really special set we have and a cool system we have that sometimes we do get lucky with those scenes. But I think that one, yeah, definitely what you thought was correct.
Hey, for me, because I was like, "Ooh, this is so cool," and okay, so for the show, like when, because again, with legal dramas, when it comes to legal dramas, like there is an aspect where police work is involved,
Mm.
and for this one, the cops were kind of like frustrating a bit because I'm like, you guys don't seem to be wanting to do your work because these students are doing all of this work for you, and like one of the scenes that had me so befuddled was where they arrested Yang in the mock trial. And they have legit, they did a PowerPoint presentation of the evidence they had. I'm like, why? First thing, why are you arresting a professor in front of his students during a mock trial? One. And then two, who presents their evidence to a room full of their potential suspects? Like, all of these kids are potential suspects. Why are you sharing the evidence you have? So I wanted to ask you about that. Like, what was the reasoning?
I mean, I can't speak to that at all. That's just the way it was written. So I can't give you a good answer on that. I did think that was weird, but we kind of had to go with it for dramatic effect, obviously.
It was just like, why? Why would you do this? Like, you're telling them the evidence. You're telling the murderer what you have.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. You're right.
So, like, this, just before you wrap up, so like one of the questions I said I had to ask you is the room where the students are studying. So I wanted to talk a bit about the set design and stuff too, but the room where the students are studying. One of my favorite medical dramas is Dr. Romantic Teacher. Wait, I'm saying it wrong. Romantic Dr. Teacher Kim. And
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
room where they're studying looks just like the room where the residents study and sleep. So I want to ask you, is that the same set or this is the set that was built from scratch for the show?
Yeah, it's all built from scratch. All the shows, the sets are built from scratch. I mean, sometimes obviously like the hospital sets and the police station sets, we have built sets that people use all the time. So a lot of the times those might be the same between shows. But if it's a space that's unique to that, like for Nangman Takto Kim Sabu, I'm sure they built all their sets somewhere that I don't
Okay.
know.
I
And we
guess.
built all of our, law school stuff. So
Oh, okay. I asked because they look really similar, like the way the windows and the doors and everything is kind of placed. I was like, this is gonna be such a nerd question, but I had to ask. So like now, so you're talking about the set. So how much of the sets in this show was built from scratch for it? Like which locations are locations that actually exist and which ones were built for the show?
most of the indoor stuff is built. So like the law school lobby with the statue of Lady Justice, that was built from scratch. The mock court was built from scratch. The classrooms were built, and the copy room and the study room and the professors' space, like the professors' offices and that hallway, it's all built. What else? I mean, Council A's house and Council B's house, they were location.
Mm.
They were actual houses that existed. I mean, I think that's about all the major spaces, no?
Yeah, yeah, the lobby, the mock court. Well, what about the hospital set? That's a hospital set. That's like a kind of like a permanent filming set.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. That kind of fascinates me with like Asian dramas is the amount of sets that get built from scratch. And then sometimes because I think the VFX teams, applause to you guys, that works and do such an amazing job. Like you kind of like buy into the in like how like you don't
Mm-hmm.
realize exactly how much of these things are built from scratch and then how much of it is actually VFX when it comes to like the size and scopes of buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the dramas that really made me like sit up and be like, wow, recently was Taylor the Ninth Tail, which has Kim Bom, who's also in law school, and they showed like a behind the scenes, like all of the houses were built from scratch on sets on sound stages. I'm like, what? The I'm just like the production quality is like always so like top notch, but like that lobby was built from scratch for true. I can't believe that. I kind of figured
Yeah,
the statue was built for the show, but the lobby too. Wow.
yeah. That whole space. It was like the biggest single set that I'd ever seen, just because it's like 2 floors and
Yeah.
it's just so huge. It takes up an entire soundstage, like you said. So Yeah, and it's like it's a really memorable space, and so we wanted to build it really well, and it turned out great, I think.
No, it's a really well designed stage. Like even the marble, the flooring, like is I just like the whole look of the whole space because it looks like a law school, but kind of doesn't at the same time, which I kind of like. But yeah, no, the production crew did a fantastic job. Like
Mhm.
kind of feel bamboozled, which I guess is the job that we're supposed to buy into it completely, and they succeeded. So, so like my last question for you is, do you have a favorite character from the show? Like, why are they your favorite character? And is there a scene that you relate to them particularly that stands out to you? Like you mentioned before, like there were a couple, but are there any that you didn't mention? Or is it just like a particular moment where like you were during filming, you were like, wow, I'm actually getting to do this, like where it kind of like hit home to you that, whoo, I'm actually PD on this drama and like I'm co-creating everything.
I mean, I don't know. I love both the professors. I love Professor Kim,
Hmm.
and the actor, she's like, one of my favorite people to work with.
Yeah.
But I love both the professors. I think they're probably, I gotta say, the two are my favorite. And um uh Kim Myung-min, who plays Professor Yang, like I was always such a huge fan of his from White Tower and King of Dramas. I think that's the English title of that one. And just like Isun Shin and stuff. So I had always been looking up to him as an actor and thought that he was just so good at what he does. And so being able to direct him, I think it was only for one or two scenes that I got him. I almost always got the students and Professor Kim, because our main director and Kim Young Min are so close that they like finish each other's sentences. So a lot of they filmed a lot of those scenes. I only got to direct him for one or two, but that was like a really surreal moment for me too. Was like being able to direct him. So that was that moment. But Professor Kim, I think, like character wise, has to be my favorite,
Hmm.
just because I feel like she would be, someone that I enjoy being with and I enjoy learning from. Just because, I would have loved to have a professor like that. So, her and I mean, obviously, I think all the students. I can't really choose one. Obviously, they're so precious to me now that I can't. I mean, I don't necessarily identify with all of them, but there are parts of me that I identify in everybody. Like obviously, um, going to uh, uh, going to Duke and being at a competitive school. Like I know what that's like, and I know what that like sometimes it can turn you into. I know what that is. But there is a part of me that felt like Kang Sole when I first got there. I was like, everyone's was like valedictorian of their high school, and I'm not necessarily the competitive type, like just academically. I just think if you study hard just by yourself, you'll do well. You don't have to take into consideration how well the other people are gonna do. That was never like my thought process. Was like I'll just do what I do,
Hmm.
and if you do well, if everybody does well, I guess just if it's like a bell curve, then I guess it's too bad for me. But I'm just gonna do my thing, and I'm just gonna study as hard as I can. I'm not gonna necessarily be like I have to beat out the competition. So but I recognize people that I went to school with in those characters, so I can't really like rule any of them out. But I did feel like Kang Sole a lot of time in college, so I did identify myself with that a little bit. But so for identification wise, I would say Professor Kim and Kang Sole. But I genuinely liked everyone. Like I feel like I could be friends with everyone.
Like Professor Kim, like I really liked her character. I like that we had an older female like professor, and she had a kid. I think it was really important that we got to see her as a mature woman pregnant, that was pregnant, because like usually when you get like characters who are pregnant, they're always young women, or if they're
Mm,
mature, like in their 30s or 40s. Like the story is usually always centered around like a difficult pregnancy, but that wasn't the case here. It was showing that she's mature. She had her career as a judge, and now she's pregnant and she's a professor, and she's an amazing professor, because like the scene where she's calling each and every student's name, like that's super impressive. And I to me, I took that as her to show how much she cares about the students, and like she took the time to learn them, because there are professors who do not take the time to learn all of their students' names.
Yeah,
They're
definitely.
just like, you're just a student number to me, and then, but she's like, yeah, no, I know everyone's face, I know everyone's name. And she even had a moment. There was a moment in the where I think it was around episode, what was it, 13 or 14, where I doubted her for a minute, and I was like, the betrayal. I was like, how could you? But then they brought it around. I'm like, yeah, that's, I'm like, that's what you call great acting and great writing. And I really love the actress, like Lee Jung Eun. Like, I know a lot of people like know her from Parasite, like especially, well, I would say a lot of Western audience would know her from Parasite. But I actually know her from like other shows. Like one of my
Mm.
favorite roles of hers from When the Camellia Blooms,
Yeah.
and like her character was something else. I'm like, she's such a fantastic actress. So when I saw the shows announced and then she was cast, I was like, yes. And then she was playing a professor, like even better. So good. And then like cancel A, she is me too. First, when it comes to
Mm-mm.
studying, I'm a procrastinator when it comes to studying. So like I cram because that's how my memory works. But I like cancel A because like she's also deceptively smart in that people think that she's either scatterbrained and that she doesn't really take things seriously, but she's super smart when she applies herself. She's able to like go toe to toe with like someone like cancel B or
Yeah.
Jung Wee, or even Professor Kang, Professor Yang. Like she went toe to toe with him a couple scenes too, and I'm like, she would be formidable. So like even at the end, I want to ask you where they're going at the end, because you know the final shot is like the three of them walking. I'm like, where are they going? Like what's going on? Where is there a trial, or like what's happening?
I think our like the general understanding was that they're gonna, like, something happened and the professor kind of needed their support, or their, they were just like, consultants, and they were just gonna work on another case together. Kind of,
Yeah,
that was kind of that was kind of what it was leading to. But I'm
yeah.
not sure if everyone thought that or if it was just me, because I wasn't there for that last scene.
Oh,
I
okay.
was I was back at the network, kind of like I had meetings and stuff, so I wasn't there. But I think that was the general understanding, was that they're gonna work on something again together, the three of them.
Yeah, yeah, that scene kind of, because I kind of like that we got an epilogue, but like that scene, like when it comes to Korean dramas, like one of the things I like is that we always get a complete story in one season, but then there's always a few shows where I'm just like, I need more. And that scene was like, I'm like, I need more. I wouldn't mind another season, these three going after some big conglomerate or something. Like it would be so
Right, right.
happy if they become like you, Professor Yang is still there, but then like um Kang Soleil and Jui are like kind of like consultants, or like what's the word I'm looking for? Junior, not junior professors. Would it be
TAs, I don't know.
PAs
Yeah.
that are professors assistants or something like that? I'm like, that would be so cool. Um so we're gonna wrap up now because we've been talking for a really long time and I really appreciate this. What can you tell us is next for you?
I'm working on a show. I don't know what the English title is, but it's about the weather service here, meteorologists here. I don't think there's an official English title for it yet. Um, I wanted to, let's see. I mean, it says "Cruel Story of Office Romance," but that's like the subtitle. That's going to be the subtitle and not the main title. But I'm trying to think of an English title, hopefully, that I can suggest pretty soon. But I'm not quite sure how to talk about it. But it's about people who work at the Korean Meteorological Administration, um, and it's kind of like an uh, office comedy romance show. It's
Hmm.
much more lighthearted. It's not like law
Uh,
school at all. It's kind of more like Diary of a Prosecutor, but meteorologists, and
hmm.
there's romance involved. So yeah, we've shot 7 or 8 days, 7 days on it, and I'm following the first unit right now. I'm just going to all the shoots, just watching and just spending time with the
actors and the director, even though I'm not doing anything physically, kind of helps me get involved, kind of get immersed in what the the first unit director, what he likes and what kind of shots he likes to do or how he likes to set up a scene. So I just have to kind of just sit there and watch it and just kind of absorb it without necessarily knowing that I'm absorbing it. Just spending time on set helps me do that, I think. So and the B team or the second unit is gonna start shooting next month, like middle of next month. So um I'm gonna be shooting, I think, side by side with him on we're just two different teams, the same show. So because I think they wanted a lot of good weather days, like
Mm.
summery days. But with one team, you can only shoot so many days. So I think they wanted as much of the good weather as possible before it gets cold, before it gets into the autumn, because it's nice. Because it's about the weather, so it's nice if it's like green and
Yeah, I
blue
was
and
thinking
sunny
that.
and you like warm and stuff. So you don't want it to be like cold and just like everything's withering away. So I think they wanted to do a second unit really early into the show just so they could get a lot of those really nice scenes in. So and it's my first time I think having like a separate unit. Most of the time I was the only one switching out. It was like the crew were the same. It was one team and just like the two directors kind of switching out. So this is my first time kind of operating a second unit, which will be an interesting experience for me. Um, but yeah, that's what I'm working on right now.
I look forward to it because like I had mentioned this to you before in chat. When it comes to these kind of dramas, like usually if it's about the news, it's about like the main news desk and like the main anchors. We don't get like the meteorological desk
Mm-hmm.
involved. So I think this is really
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really I think it'll be really fun to get that aspect of the news. Like it's not all about breaking news. It's about, like weather. Like weather can be dramatic too. Like right now, like we all
Yeah,
went
it's
through like
definitely
super
super
dramatic
dramatic.
stuff.
And the people who work there they have to be very, very smart. Like I'm finding out a lot of new things about it too. And there haven't been any Korean TV shows previously about this profession either. So I've been able to work on shows that haven't really been done before. So it's hard to find like references to go off of and like things that I can watch to kind of learn about it even.
Mm,
So it's an interesting experience for sure.
mm, mm. I think the real wrap up. I'll let you go now because I know it's like late for you. You had filming earlier today, so again, thank you so much, Christine, for talking with me. This has been like legit a dream come true because this is one of the things I love doing is speaking to creatives in the film and TV industry. And because I'm such a huge fan of Korean dramas, it's like really special to me to get an opportunity to talk to someone like you involved in the industry and involved in actually creating these shows. So I really appreciate you taking the time to
No,
speak.
no, thank you for loving law school and helping spread the word and supporting us. It meant a lot to us at the time we were airing, and we're glad that so many people liked it. And I've just been getting so many DMs about season two, and it's been a crazy outpouring of love and support that I didn't expect at all. So we're always very grateful. Everyone is. Everyone that's worked on the project is kind of surprised, pleasantly surprised, and very grateful for all the support.
Yeah, no, thank you. And like you and the entire crew, like applause to all of you. You guys did an amazing job. The writer Soin and the director, I don't remember if I mentioned his name before, but I want to make sure that I do. Kim Suk Yoon, like him, entire team, you guys all did an amazing job. Like I always try to make sure that I give props to like the creative and the production teams because
Hmm.
most fans only think about the actors and the
Hmm.
characters, like me, like the fashion. But I'm like, no, you got to give like recognition to the production crews and the writers and like
Hmm.
the DPs and the craft services. Craft services is very important.
Definitely.
The teams that create the sets, like they're like and the VFX, because like a lot of people don't realize how much VFX is actually used
Hmm.
films or even in just regular dramas. Like VFX has become
Hmm.
an extremely big part of production, and
Yeah,
like kudos to everyone involved.
definitely. Thank you.
Oh, and would you like to tell everyone where they can find you on social media if you want them to find you?
Um, yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram is like at Seco Blues, and Twitter is at Seco Likes, I think is what it is right now. I know that Twitter is like a cool space for fans to interact, and I've gotten a lot of messages there. It's easier for me to, I think, interact with fans on Twitter than it is on Instagram. So I've told fans, like, you know, if they have any questions, they can tweet at me, and I'll feel free to answer. So I've gotten a lot of DMs that way, and I've talked to a lot of fans that way too. So yeah, it's been crazy. It's been great fun doing law school and everything, even post, just like after the fact. It's been great hearing all the good feedback and support. It's been surreal.